Oil test. 3 formulations, real data, 1 winner. A single bottle of oil can decide whether your engine is still tight at 100,000 miles or knocking at 40,000. Same bike, same rider, same roads. The only thing that changes is what's poured into the crankcase. Today, we're putting 3 oils head-to-head. A standard 20W-50, a 20W-40, and a full synthetic V-twin blend. Lab numbers, teardown photos, and real wear data. Not another opinion video. Stick around because the winner surprised even the techs who ran this test. If this is your first time here, welcome to the channel. We're building something real in this space. Reviews backed by actual data, not sponsor scripts. If that sounds like your kind of channel, drop a like and subscribe so you don't miss what's coming. Now, let's get into the results. A few quick questions. We know you're asking. Every rider has heard the same oil advice for years. The manual says 1 viscosity. The dealer sells you the house brand bottle. The service counter never brings up alternatives. It's printed the same way it's been printed for decades, and nobody questions it until something goes wrong. Ask around any garage or forum and you'll hear the same complaints. Valve noise that won't quiet down. Cam chain tensioners wearing out early. Engines that run hotter than they should in traffic. Some riders swear their bike calmed down completely after switching oils. Others are scared to stray from the factory-branded bottle because they think it'll void the warranty, even though most warranty language only requires you to meet a spec, not buy a specific brand. Meanwhile, the price of the premium synthetic keeps climbing every year, while the base conventional oil hasn't changed in decades. So the question riders keep asking is simple. Is the factory-recommended oil actually the best option for long-term durability, or is it just the most convenient thing for the shop to sell you? We wanted real answers, not marketing claims, not forum opinions, actual lab data from a controlled test. It's easy to treat oil like an afterthought. Pour in whatever the sticker on the frame says, ride, repeat. But an engine doesn't care what the sticker says. It cares about film strength at operating temperature, how well that film survives shear forces between moving parts, and how much metal ends up suspended in the oil after a hard ride in July traffic. Every one of those factors compounds over time. 1/10 of a degree of extra heat here, a fraction of a percent of extra wear metal there. None of it matters on a single ride. But stack that up over the 20 or 30 oil changes a bike sees on its way to 100,000 or 150,000 miles. And you're either looking at an engine that's tight at the end of that run or one that's already had a top-end rebuild. That's the entire reason this test exists. Small numbers now, big consequences later. It's also why so much of the advice floating around forums and comment sections is unreliable. One rider's bike lasted 150,000 miles on the cheapest oil they could find, so they swear by it. Another rider's engine ticked within 20,000 miles on the exact same product. Neither story is necessarily wrong, but neither one is a controlled test either. Riding style, climate, maintenance intervals, and load all change the outcome. That's exactly the kind of noise we tried to eliminate here. Here's exactly what we did, so you know these numbers aren't guesswork. All 3 oils ran through the same engine on the same route, with the same rider and the same filter swapped at every interval. No sponsorships, no outside funding. Every sample was barcoded and logged with a chain of custody sheet, so every drop of oil that hit the lab could be traced back to the exact ride it came from. For temperature, we used a bank of thermocouples logging readings every 5 seconds. One at the cylinder head, one in the oil pan, one on the primary. Each probe stayed locked in place for the full test cycle, and the engine was always brought to full operating temperature before we started the clock. Used oil analysis was handled by an independent lab that processes samples professionally every day. Every bottle we sent in was scanned, sealed, and tracked from the moment it left the garage to the moment the report landed in our inbox. We also controlled for the variables that usually mess up these comparisons online. Same ambient temperature range across all 3. Test runs, same mix of highway and stop-and-go city riding, same 5,000-mile interval before pulling a sample down to within a few miles on each run. Nothing was left to chance, and nothing was swapped mid-test. That means when you see a difference in wear or temperature in a few minutes, it's not because of a different filter, a shortcut in the ride, or a mystery additive. It's the oil itself, with the lab as the referee. Before we get to the results, if you're trying to keep your bike running well past 100,000 miles, we put together a full maintenance breakdown covering oil intervals, tension or service schedules, and the stuff most owners' manuals barely mention. Links in the description if you want it. Now let's get into the numbers. Round 1, 20W-40. Out on the road, once the mercury climbs, the 20W-40 showed its limits fast. Head temperatures ran 5 to 7 degrees hotter compared to the thicker oils in this test. That extra heat doesn't just sit in the metal, it thins the oil itself. The lab sheet showed a viscosity loss of 9.4% after a single interval. That's a noticeable drop in film thickness by the end of the run, even with identical riding conditions across all three oils. Wear metals told the same story. Iron and aluminum content came in 18% higher than the other two oils, which points to more friction on cam lobes, rings, and bearings. When we pulled the covers for teardown photos, the difference was visible. The cam lobes had lost their oil film, and there were early signs of scoring on the valve train. One tech on our team summed it up simply: this is what happens when you run a lighter oil in an engine that runs hot. It just can't hang on once temperatures climb. Riders in our comments section have described this exact pattern for years. A bike that idles fine in the driveway, then starts ticking after 20 minutes stuck in summer traffic. A top end that sounds tight on a cool morning ride and noticeably looser by the time the sun's high. Our data lines up with what a lot of you have already been telling us. This isn't a one-off complaint. It's a pattern the lab confirms. For anyone chasing serious mileage, that's a real red flag. The 20W-40 might give you an easier cold start, but under real load and real heat, it leaves critical parts more exposed than they need to be. Round 2, 20W-50. Conventional moving to a standard 20W-50, the numbers improve right away. Cylinder head temps drop 4 to 6 degrees compared to the 20W-40 run. That doesn't sound like much on paper, but in an air-cooled or hybrid-cooled V-twin, a few degrees off the top can be the difference between a quiet top end and a ticking valve train once the miles pile up. Viscosity held up better too, just 6.8% loss after the same interval, a solid improvement over the thinner oil. That means the film stayed intact longer under heat. Wear metals backed up what a lot of longtime riders have said for years. Iron content dropped 22% compared to the 20W-40 run, and aluminum came down as well, pointing to less scuffing on cam lobes and piston skirts. One of our techs, who's been building air-cooled engines for over 2 decades, put it this way: run a good 20W-50 and you don't hear that cam chain slap or lifter tick nearly as early. Out on the road, the bike felt steadier, less rattle at idle, smoother shifts, none of the compensator noise that had crept in with the lighter oil. And it does all of this at a fraction of the synthetics price per quart, which matters if you're the type of rider putting on 8,000 or 10,000 miles a season. Over a few years of ownership, that price gap between conventional and synthetic adds up to real money, enough to matter for anyone watching their maintenance budget. The 20W-50 didn't fix every quirk in the book, but it gave the engine a real fighting chance at high mileage, and it did it without the price tag of the synthetic. For most riders, it's a meaningful upgrade over the 20W-40, especially anywhere the climate runs hot. Round 3, full synthetic V-twin blend. This is where things get interesting. The full synthetic blend ran 8 to 10 degrees cooler than the 20W-40, the sharpest temperature drop we recorded in the entire test. That kind of cooling can quiet a noisy top end and keep critical components in check during long summer rides. Viscosity loss was minimal, just 4.2% after the same interval, outperforming both conventional oils. That suggests the synthetics film resists thinning under heat and load significantly better than the conventional blends. Riders who've made the switch to a full synthetic often describe the same thing: a bike that feels noticeably calmer on long highway stretches in summer, less heat radiating up through the seat and pegs in stop-and-go traffic, and an engine that seems to settle into a lower, steadier idle once it's fully warmed up. Our thermocouple data backs that impression up directly. This isn't just a feel, it's a measurable drop in operating temperature at every probe location. But the label only tells part of the story. The price on this oil lands well above both conventional options, often $18 to $22 a quart, which adds up fast for anyone logging serious miles every season. But cooling and short-term viscosity numbers only tell part of the story. The real question is how this oil holds up under sustained pressure. And that's what the next test would settle. What this costs you over time. At roughly $8 to $10 a quart, the 20W-40 is the cheapest option on paper, but based on what we just measured, it's also the option most likely to cost you a valve job or a tensioner replacement down the line. Cheap oil that accelerates wear isn't actually cheap once you factor in labor and parts. The 20W-50 conventional lands in the middle, usually $10 to $14 a quart depending on where you shop, and it delivers a real jump in protection over the 20W-40 for a small difference in price per oil change. The full synthetic sits well above both, typically $18 to $22 a quart. Over a full season of riding, that's a noticeably bigger bill at every interval. The question this test is really answering is whether that extra cost buys you enough extra protection to justify it, or whether you're just paying more for a label. The lab verdict. To settle this properly, we ran a neutral 4-ball wear test to ASTM D4172 standards on all 3 oils. This test measures how well each oil actually protects metal under pressure. It's the number that matters most for long-term engine health. Here's how they stacked up, smallest wear scar to largest. Full synthetic V-twin blend, 0.39 millimeters 20W-50, conventional, 0.55 millimeters 20W-40, 0.72 millimeters. Lower numbers mean less metal loss to friction. That gap isn't academic. It's the difference between a cam that stays quiet and a top end that starts ticking at 80,000 miles. When we combined wear scar results with viscosity retention into a composite ranking, the edge went to the full synthetic V-twin blend. Its film held up best under heat and load, and it posted the lowest wear number in the entire test. We showed the raw data to 10 experienced techs with no stake in the outcome. 7 of them said they'd run the top-scoring synthetic in their own bike for the long haul. One master tech put it bluntly: dealer oil is fine for basic warranty work, but if you want your tensioners to last, you go with whatever wins the wear test, full stop. And here's something worth knowing if you've been worried about coverage. Warranty language on most bikes only requires an oil that meets the spec, the right API rating, the right viscosity. You don't lose your warranty for choosing a top-performing oil just because it didn't come in the manufacturer's bottle. The bottom line. The lab numbers don't lie. Across cooling, viscosity retention, and wear protection, the full synthetic V-twin blend came out on top. Cooler running, less breakdown under heat, and the lowest wear scar of anything we tested. The standard 20W-50 conventional oil is a genuinely solid budget option that beats the 20W-40 by a wide margin. And the 20W-40, while it might start easier on a cold morning, left the most wear behind on every metric that actually matters for long-term engine life. If you're chasing serious mileage, the kind where you want your cam chain quiet and your tensioners tight well past 6 figures, the data points to one clear direction. It's not about what's printed on the bottle or what the shop pushes at the counter. It's about what the lab actually measured inside the engine. Does running a non-branded oil void your warranty? Not on its own, at least under U.S. law. Under the Magnuson-Moss Warranty Act, as long as the oil meets the required API rating and viscosity spec, manufacturers generally can't require their own branded fluid just because it's convenient for them to sell it. Though there are exceptions, including cases where the branded fluid is provided free of charge. If you're riding outside the U.S., check your own country's warranty and consumer protection rules, since they can differ. Is the synthetic worth the extra cost for a daily commuter with light mileage? If you're only putting on a couple thousand miles a year and changing oil on schedule regardless of brand, the 20W-50 conventional gets you most of the protection for a lot less money. The synthetic earns its price for high mileage riders, hot climates, and anyone planning to keep the bike well past 100,000 miles. Should you ever run the 20W-40? Based on what we measured, only if your climate is genuinely cold year-round and you rarely see sustained highway heat. Everywhere else, the data says you're leaving protection on the table. That's the test. That's the data. Now you decide what goes in your crankcase. If this breakdown helped, hit subscribe. We've got more head-to-head tests like this coming, and we're not stopping until every corner of this hobby gets the real numbers instead of another marketing pitch. Drop a comment with the oil you're currently running and your mileage. We're pulling viewer bikes for a future long-term follow-up test, and your real-world data might end up on screen. See you in the next one.